Right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Sunil. Excuse me. Okay, we'll get started in a minute. Okay, let's get started. So yesterday we have seen that we had a little issue towards the end, but didn't figure out what exactly had happened because it said someone started using the session and I could not rejoin, or none of us could rejoin because I only set time till 4:15. So I thought it could be because the time was done and some technical issue had happened and it didn't allow us to get in because the session was ended. So today I put it till 5 o'clock. So even if something like that happens, so we can rejoin. So in case if it repeats, the same problem repeats, I think we should all be able to rejoin. In case if we won't be able to rejoin, I will reschedule the class immediately. So we can join, okay, and continue with the maybe 2 recorded lessons will be there because recording will stop, which automatically happens. We don't have control on that. Okay, so that is, I think, what we are going to do today. Okay, hopefully it won't repeat because we know that one administrator can use it, but we know that he was not using it at the same time yesterday. Let's see if it repeats. We have to talk to the organization which controls it. Okay, but if not, for temporary sake, we are going to reschedule the class immediately and we'll continue with the session. Right. So I think we're coming to the end of evolution and evolutionary terms. Yesterday we discussed about a few terms, especially we talked about speciation, correct? We talked about adaptive radiation, and we talked about few types and mechanisms of speciation, correct? We talked about allopatric, parapatric, and sympathetic speciation. So let me briefly ask you, because conceptually, knowing the difference and being able to provide examples is what is needed here, right? So let's see if you understood the concepts, and if at all you are asked to differentiate the terms, would you be able to do it? Okay, right. What is a species? Anyone voluntarily, any one of you can actually say it. You don't have to be exactly right. Whatever you understood from the class, try to say it. So what is a species? How do you define a species?
Sir, one that can reproduce and produce offspring which can reproduce
Basically, you can use the word. They can give rise to fertile offspring.
fertile offspring.
Horses and donkeys are the same species?
No,
Horse
sir.
and donkey, they're not, because they give rise to mule, which is not fertile. Correct? They may have similarities because they have common ancestor, but they won't be able to reproduce because they are distinct enough. Okay, distinct enough to you can forcefully reproduce them, but they won't be able to give rise to the fertile offspring. So species is defined like that. Okay, right. So what is the process of speciation? What is speciation? Speciation refers to
a new species being created from
formation
existing.
of new species. The process behind formation of new species can be called as speciation. It's like a verb, speciation, formation of new species. Correct. We talked about different types of speciation, right? So we discussed about allopatric, parapatric, sympathetic. Did you understand the difference between them or among them? What is patric? Patric refers to place. And allo refers to, allo means
Different.
So when people started understanding more about evolution, the question that came to their mind that if people or any organisms that live together undergo reproduction, so they mate with each other, and genetic information is being exchanged, right? They stay more or less same. On average, their characteristics remain same. Correct. But what happens? In order to form new species, you have to somehow break that relationship. Somehow you have to separate them from each other. The simplistic scenario that I think it is a simplest scenario that can be easily explained is allopatric. Allo means different, geographically separated. So if you separate two organisms, a group of organisms into two different places, then what happens? You're basically creating a boundary between them. What happens? You're separating them. They have equal opportunity to evolve, but they're separately evolving. If they're separately evolving, it is unlikely that they acquire same changes and become the same organism. It's like, you separate two groups of people. they may not have exactly same food habits, they may not have exactly same cultural features, because they influence each other within the group, but unless you have a common connection, okay, they won't influence each other. In this case, genetical influence we're talking about. If there is no mating happening among them, there won't be exchange of genetic information. So simplistic scenario is separate them physically. Maybe, how can we separate populations, two populations, as per our discussion yesterday? What separates, given organisms from each other?
Environmental demands or characteristics of the population.
Okay, environmental demand acts later. First of all, there need to be a physical separation. Very simple, nothing complex here. What separates two organisms? Let's say there was a population. Remember that image you were talking about? There was
Geographical.
population together. So there was some sort of separation happened, geographical separation or isolation happened.
Mountain or a waterway.
Correct. Mountains, water, deserts, anything that physically separates, which makes it difficult for them to come together. Correct. So physical separation. When they got separated, evolution is a normal feature for any organism, from bacteria to humans. They evolve. Then comes the environmental demand. They evolve as per the environmental demands. But it is not necessary that both evolve in the same manner. Both acquire same mutations. Correct. All of us may acquire certain set of mutations, but only when mating happens, exchange of these genetic mutations take place. So thereby we get an average picture of that population. Correct? Okay. So example, we talked about separation of them. I think the example that repeatedly we visited yesterday. Darwin Finches, right? Found in Galapagos Islands. They got separated physically. They had different needs to survive. They acquired different features. Correct. Okay. And this is the common theme. But is this the only way to create new species? Okay. So yes, I think the most common method seems to be geographical separation or isolation. But sometimes without the need for complete geographical separation, there can be evolution happening side by side within the same region or in the adjacent region. Okay, we've seen that image where a circle was drawn and next to that, the kind of a bubble was created. Some organisms moved to the nearby region. They were evolving side by side. They were geographically connected, but they were temporarily isolated. How is that called? How is that speciation called?
Parapatric.
Parapatric. So it could be a kind of an extension to allopatric. Allo means separate. Here, no separation has happened, but temporary separation is found. The third case scenario we talked about. How is that called? What is the third term we talked about yesterday? Sympathetic. Means same. How is it possible for them to evolve? There was one article I was reading. So sympathetic is something that is controversial. You cannot prove it easily. It's very difficult to prove. The example we took yesterday, I think, probably made the basis for understanding sympathetic speciation. That is, host. Different vectors find different hosts. Sometimes, same mosquito population split into different categories. Some started living on plants, some started living on animals. They adapted. They were there in the same group, but they adapted. They went to a different niche. They started relying on plants. Some started relying on animals. So their environment is changed. Their requirements have changed. They live in the same geographical area, correct? Is it possible for them to have derive into different species in that case? Right, they can, correct? So like that, sympathetic is difficult to explain, but few studies have gave the idea that they can live in the same area, but still they may have a preference that was created. Eventually they accumulated enough changes, became new species. They're mosquitoes, the new species of mosquitoes. I think this is a very limited examples are there. It is difficult to prove what is sympathetic evolution, but it is a possibility. So be familiar about the word sympathetic evolution. But did you understand the difference between these terms? Allopatric, parapatric, and sympathetic.
For sympathetic, So is it, so preference is one reason and the other can be genetic divergence, or preference is due to genetic divergence?
So preferences is one way of explaining it. Genetic divergence seems to be the core theme there. If you read from the literature, genetic divergence, meaning having that diversity or specific mutations that make them to survive on plants better than on animals. So the core idea seems to be the genetic divergence. Preference, to explain it to you, I had to use the word preference. Like I had to tell you with the example of religious specificity. People live together, but they have preference towards one particular religion. They marry within that religion. Cultural influence, as we study in anthropology, this seems to be more related concept to us. So people have preference to marry within their own religion. They're living in the same geographical area, there is same environmental demand, but there are different paths one can take to survive. As they are limiting their genetic pool to their own religion, what is happening? They are accumulating those changes. But I was, I think, briefly discussing with you, we are not seeing those analytical questions in the exams. But in case if you have to answer something like this, is it possible? Do you think humans, because of their religious specificities or priorities or preferences, do you think they are going to result in new species eventually? Is it possible? Do you think it is a possible case? What has to happen?
Sir, I read a news where a golden tiger has been found in Kaziranga.
Okay.
So it was some mutation. So can we say it was semi?
Can we say? I could not get the last word.
Can we say it is semi-Patrick?
Sympathetic. Yeah, possible. I think we need more data on that. But it's a genetic divergence. For some reason, it gained certain features like that, which looked different, can be classified as a different species. This can happen if they're living in the same forest, for example, same environment.
Sir, is golden
Sir, I got one example.
Yes. Sorry. Who, Shweta, were you talking? Who else were talking?
Sir, I got speciation. Hello.
Yeah. Can you please repeat? The voice was breaking.
Sir, I got one example of sympathetic speciation. There is in Lake Victoria in Africa. There is this species, sea child fishes.
Correct.
There,
Yes.
in
IGNO talks about. Am I right? Did you pick this up from IGNO? IGNO
yes,
has
sir, in state board book, in 12th state board, I got it.
Correct. I was reading about that. Yes, but in a different source. What was that? Right. So yes, you can find examples of organisms. I think one of them being the vectors, mosquitoes. Some insect populations. The example I took from there was something you can easily relate. So I took that example from a source where a vector, meaning an insect that can carry like mosquito population, getting adapted to different sources like plants versus animals. You can pick up that as an example for sympathetic. There are more examples, but difficult to remember. So I wanted to actually chose something that is easier for you to follow. Okay, but concept is this: they live together, but some amount of genetic diversity pushed them in different directions in evolution. Okay, right. I think someone was asking, if I'm not wrong, Sunil, you were asking about this question like ecological succession.
Yes.
Correct. Ecological succession is related to this, but we are seeing that in a different way. So ecological succession means for some reason species actually have changed. Maybe there was lava that killed everything and then new life had formed. So ecological success are some successors with differences in their behavior or species nature or some characteristics have evolved. Or naturally we notice that all those organisms which existed millions of years ago are not same today. They kept evolving. So new species are replacing the old ones. But at a given point of time, you see old species as well as new species. But over a period of time, some get extinct, some actually stay, new species get formed. So they are getting replaced in a way. Correct? A variety is being formed, which is a common theme, a core theme of evolution. So in a way, it is connected to evolution in that manner, but it is viewed in a different context. But they are related. They are connected to each other because evolution is an ongoing theme. Formation of new species is a result of evolution. So you will find some new species is being formed in place of the old ones. But do they really replace them? They don't. Humans have originated, evolved from chimpanzees or monkeys. Did we replace them? No. Monkeys exist, chimpanzees exist, humans exist. But in future, they may some of them may get extincted. Why? Because they could not survive. They could not adapt quick enough. Okay. So ecologically, if you see that, it seems like new species are being formed. Diversity is increasing in the living systems. That is what is normally refers to as ecological succession. There are different types of them, which is relevant to this concept, but they are connected in that manner. Okay. So we are viewing that in a different way. Correct, but both are related to the concept of evolution. Okay, what else we talked about yesterday? Yesterday, I think we discussed about, did you understand the difference between convergent and divergent evolution? What is the difference between convergent and divergent evolution? Just pick up from what you remember. Converge, diverge. Can someone explain me the difference? Or someone, can you tell me about convergent evolution? One of you. Yeah.
Sunil,
Go ahead.
Go on.
So, sir, ancestors are different in case of conversion.
Correct.
They come out to have the similar kind of structure or similar kind of function, similar kind of structure or function. That is conversion.
Correct.
And
Convergent, very good point. I think I want just to repeat this. So you rightly started with saying they are different. They are different, they converge to become something similar. So this is the most important thing here. Convergent evolution refers to two different species evolving to look similar. Converge. Very good. Okay, divergent evolution. Can someone explain about divergent evolution? So what is divergent evolution?
Two different species having a common ancestor evolve, accumulate changes over time, and form a set of homologous organs that may look similar structurally but have different functions.
Exactly. Right. So I'll pick up examples for both of them. But one thing we can say, yes, to make it simple, instead of saying two different species, you can say those that are derived from the same ancestor. Because in the convergent, we wanted to say that two different organisms, two different species like A and B, may become somewhat similar organisms. Converge. Divergent may be divergent, they may be similar. Already to begin with, they are similar. They are derived from the same ancestor, but they got diverged. So they went away. So instead of placing arrows towards, you actually place away from each other. So they got diverged. So convergent. So these are two different outcomes of evolution. Correct? So convergent, two different species can become similar. Divergent, derived species from the common ancestor diverge into different species. Correct. Homologous organs, analogous organs. I think you already pointed out, Vishal. Homologous organs are those organs that look similar but have different functions. Examples that we talked about?
Front limbs of humans, horses, cats.
Humans, horses, cats, wings of bats and birds look similar but serve different purposes. Correct? Okay. We also talked about Darwin Finches. Can be also taken as an example for homologous organs. What about convergent evolution? What can we take as examples for convergent evolution?
like analogous organs like bird wings, bat wings, and
insect wings. Correct? They all are different species, but they converge to have some similar structures. They're not made up of the same type of structures. Correct? The intricacy of it is different. Birds have feathers, and bats actually have foldings, membranes. Insects have different structures, but they all serve the purpose of flying. They are called analogous organs. The image I was showing you yesterday, okay, I will share that image with you. So that is a simple concept that you can pick up here. So homologous, analogous organs, convergent, divergent evolutions, we can explain. We also talked about another type of evolution yesterday. What is that evolution? I think towards the end we were discussing about it and it got disconnected there, right?
Parallelism.
Parallelism. What is parallelism?
When there's two different species develop in the same environment and they develop same functions. We have talked about squirrel, I think, like flying squirrel sort of.
Correct. Sugar gliders and flying squirrels. Okay, one thing I want you to notice here. So parallelism, the two species may have common ancestor to them. They don't have to be completely different species. Okay, I'm going to share this image to explain you this. So see the image I was showing you yesterday. So we were talking about rat-like species, rat-like ancestor in a mammal group. Okay, but animals, species derived from them. So they have common ancestor, but one living in Australia, another one living in North America. So there's a common theme. Okay, what happened? They both in different places, but in similar environments, they actually grew to have similar structures, but they were not together. They were not living in the same environment. They were there in different countries, one in Australia, one in North America. But they happen to look very similar to each other. They look like, cousin sisters of each other in a way, but they evolved in different places. Of course, there's a lot of depth to this type of concept. Like one thing I would like to tell you here is they probably have some same genetic potential. They carry similar DNA. So adding variety to the existing form is easier than adding completely new features to them. We all have certain amount of genetic potential. Like for example, humans all attain certain amount of height. We all attain some certain amount of weight, right? There is a potential for that in our DNA. We'll talk about this in coming classes. It is an interplay between our DNA and the environment. The product is the combination of our DNA and the environment. Without having genetic potential, let's say there are some tribal groups, for example, they tend to be very, very short. Take them to Africa, where people tend to be taller, thinner and taller, less stocky. Okay, we'll study them in ecological anthropology. Do you think they will gain the weight? They will gain the height without having genetic potential. So DNA is not meant, DNA don't have genes to provide that height. We briefly talked about this concept in Mendelian principles. We talked about quantitative traits or polygenic traits. Correct? There we talked about height is such a polygenic trait. Let's say people, one tribal group don't have those genes. Without having that component in the DNA, do you think they can attain the height? Because environment is forcing them to grow taller. Is it possible without DNA supporting this concept? Did you understand what I'm trying to tell you here? So genetic potential forms the basis. Unless you have the DNA elements that can satisfy that characteristic, it may not happen. Environment cannot, even how much ever environment can force, this may not happen. Okay, why am I talking to you about this? Because they both sugar glider and flying squirrel have the genetic potential in them, because of which they could attain similar features. Although they may use it for different purposes, but they attained similar features. They look similar to each other, although they actually evolved in different parts of the world. One in North America, another one in Australia. Okay, so why is it called parallel evolution? Parallelly in different places they evolved into something that is similar. This is called parallel evolution. Different from convergent, divergent, parallel evolution. I think in IGNO material, I think they have given some sort of presentation on this. Like you can draw arrow marks for convergent evolution, divergent evolution, parallel evolution. A becomes B, C becomes D. B and D are similar. Okay, you can use those type of pictures. Let me see if I can find that and send you an image of that. Okay, if I'm not wrong, IGNO or some other source. I remember seeing that somewhere. Let me find that out and show. Okay, you can describe it like this. Did you understand the difference between parallel evolution and convergent and divergent evolution?
Sir, one question.
Good.
Sir, here we are not going by the color of the squirrels.
No.
Let's say we have humans, some tribes in some particular island, and we. So if we compare ourselves with them, then again we can say that we were in the similar environment, and that's why we look like this. I mean,
Right. First of all humans probably have evolved. I don't think humans have evolved simultaneously in different parts of the world. So I think what I meant to say, probably humans might have started their life at one particular place and then migrated and evolved in those places. Okay, which is more likely than more. I don't know if you believe in the concept of Adam and Eve, that many Adams and Eves were born in different parts of the world at the same time or in a similar time range. That may not be the case. People probably have evolved and they moved, migrated, and started, evolving into slightly different races, if you believe in the concept, or different populations. So in a way, we all carry same genetic potential. Either it is tribal groups or it is people living in urban areas, doesn't matter. We probably carry similar genetic potential. Correct? So if they are exposed to similar environment, then as you rightly said, and which is the case, we may look same. Red Indians would look like Indians. Why were they called Red Indians? Why did they think, why Columbus thought it is actually India? Because of shared features. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Red Indians. I don't know if I can recollect any movie actor. Do you know any movie actor who is Red Indian? Not able to recollect, because I have seen Red Indians in the place where I was graduated. There they actually look very much like us. I mean, at least several features. They look like South Indians. They have certain features which made him to think that they were Indians. Some sort of environmental factors, but we all have same genetic potential. But depending on the environment, we may end up looking similar. Okay.
so we also follow the parallelism concept.
We can pick up human examples where parallel evolution is possible. Yes. Yeah. I'm just trying to recollect an example I was seeing in hominin evolution. In human evolution, there was something like that I was reading. We probably will discuss that in Unit 1.6 when we talk about.
So one more thing.
Yeah. Good.
Similar to the parallelism, we also had adaptive radiation.
Mm-hmm.
We can also fit humans in adaptive radiation as well.
Mammals. Yes, mammal. We took the example yesterday, right? So common ancestors of mammals have resulted in divergent species. Okay, humans. You're talking about in terms of migration and adaptation.
Yes, I mean, so there were humans and they migrated. So some adapted to the environment and some got short height, they became Mongolites. The others, like some Aryan race, and then we have Dravidian race. So
But
again, we can.
you're right. The thing is, still we are the same species. We may have to wait for another million years or so to take this as an example. Correct? We haven't formed a new species. There's only one human species existing as far as our knowledge goes. We had some ancestral species, but they disappeared. What we have today is Homo sapiens. Yes, they may be different races. Again, the concept of race is social or biological is a big debate, which we'll talk about in, I think, Unit 9.5, if I'm not wrong, or 9.4, 9.5. So we'll see that we have not grown into or evolved into new species yet. Okay, but it may happen. And already I was telling you, it may in future become impractical because there's a lot of mixing happening. There's no boundaries anymore. So genetic pool is not restricted anymore. If you keep the tribe as a tribe for maybe at least several thousand, several hundred thousands of years, possible. But that is unlikely. So the barriers are diminishing. The genetic pool is getting more and more mixed.
So there is also evidence of breeding between Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens as well. So if do we consider these as two different species, or how do we place them?
Yes, Neanderthalensis is considered as a different species because normally biologically, especially what is called binomial nomenclature. Remember, we're talking about Carl Linnaeus. So the second part is species. So Homo sapiens is a different species than Homo neanderthalensis. They're considered to be different species. Okay, but if they, yeah, I remember this article, I have seen it. Yeah. Okay, but that actually makes the argument whether they are of same species or not. Correct. So let me see if I can find that example, and I think that questions the definition of species. Correct, because we said like in the case of horse and donkey, can you call it a different species? But in literature, it is called as a different species. Homo sapiens is different from Homo neanderthalensis. Okay, let me make a note of it. Because I see the point you are raising here.
This can also be an example of sympathetic speciation that we were discussing, where some genetic variation, and we were also discussing using the example you mentioned about religion and the preference of not or mating within religion. And over the period of time, if they maintain it, there may be some variation, but if they start intermingling, the variation will go away.
Correct.
So if we apply this here, I think it makes sense probably, as in there are variations, but over the time we started breeding, and again we as a result the kind of variation is lost, or a new kind of equilibrium is formed.
I talked about Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Likely, yes. But yes, we have to see geographically where they were. There was some sort of common area that could have led to this because the transport was very limited at that time, right? So probably they were living in neighboring areas in the same area. Somehow, I don't know whether we have enough evidence. The problem here is these are all explanations that we give. We don't have a clear evidence. These archaeologists come up with ideas. So why there were mixed features in some species of both Neanderthals as well as Homo sapiens. So the likely explanation is they probably mated at one point of time. Correct? These are explanations. It's very difficult to come to a conclusion based on that. That is one big problem with archaeology, because we live on the limited evidences, and we have discrepancies in what's available to us. So the picture is always blurred. Okay, but as you explained it, it is a likely explanation to us. But do we really know about it, whether it happened? It's very difficult to do. But your idea is correct. Okay, right. Anything else? I think the last component we have to talk before going to certain rules we have to discuss here: Mosaic evolution. What is the concept of Mosaic evolution? Because we discussed the remaining concepts here: parallelism, convergence, adaptive radiation. We finished Mosaic evolution. We're talking. In addition to that, I also discussed with you about speciation. So what is Mosaic evolution? What does it mean by mosaics or mosaicism?
Mosaic is like a pattern or a grid of some sort.
Right. So mosaic floors you might have seen, right? Different colors or combinations of colors that are put together. Mosaics means mixture, mixed. Correct? So pattern that has mixed colors or mixed components in it is called mosaics. So what is mosaic evolution then? What mixed nature has to do with evolution? Okay, I'm going to show you an article which talks briefly about this concept because not much is known. There are articles which talk about this concept, but I want to introduce the idea about what is mosaicism in evolution. How is it different from what we discussed so far? For this, I would like to show you this article I was reading. So this is called Mosaic Evolution, written by De Silva from Dartmouth College in USA. So by definition, if you want, just make a note of this. I'll share this article with you. Mosaic evolution refers to sequential acquisition of evolutionary changes. Sequential meaning orderly acquisition of evolutionary novelties, meaning new features, within a single structure of the body. Okay, I'll explain you what this is. Okay, for now, just make a note of it. It will become easy, even though I'm going to send you the article, but making note of few points like this will become easy. So mosaic evolution can be referred to as sequential acquisition of evolutionary novelties, meaning acquiring new features within a single structure of the body or single region, single part of the body. I'll come to example later. Just for now, just make a note of this. Okay, there is another version of another idea about this. Write down that idea as well. So sometimes additionally, we refer mosaic evolution to describe patchwork of evolution, meaning bits and pieces coming together or evolving simultaneously in the same person, in the same body, not in the same person, not necessarily, the same species. Patchwork evolution of non-morphological features, meaning not related to the body specifically, but related to something like speech, some characteristics like speech, DNA. So these components evolving simultaneously. I would like to add something a bit more specific here that I want you to add to this part to make it a bit more clear. So as I was telling you, mosaic refers to mixed pattern. Okay. So here it is referring to the idea of, let's say humans are evolving. Do every part of our body evolve at the same rate? Like if you see, we'll see this in unit 1.6, where we are going to learn about 1.5, not in 1.6, where we are going to learn about human brain. First of all, we notice that human spine got evolved, human limbs got evolved. From chimpanzees, we started having feet which was suitable for bipedalism, where we could only walk on 2 feet without the need for the forearms. Our limbs got evolved to have that, balanced feet, and changes have happened. Our knees have changed. Our femur, the thigh bone has changed. Our pelvic region has changed. Our spine has changed. Our brain is shifted. Our head is shifted backwards. Okay, you'll understand this and the factors. These are biological factors in human evolution. So, but did they all happen at the same time? Our spine, brain, did they evolve at the same time? Our heart evolved at the same time? No, they all evolved at different rates at different points of time. So this is meaning there is a different pattern or order to evolution within single species like humans. That is called mosaicism, meaning mixed rate of evolution happening in different parts of the body can be called as mosaic evolution. Okay, so there is no very specific order. There is no similarity in terms of rate at which evolution is taking place at different parts of the body. They're all mixed. So this is what is referred to as mosaic evolution. There are different ways people explain it. I'll give you a brief idea about historically what people thought about. How is it connected to humans? We'll pick up a human example here. There are many such examples. This is commonly seen in human evolution and also in many other species, evolution of many other species. Okay, I'm going to repeat what I talked to you so far. Definitions wise, or what is a mosaic evolution? So I was telling you briefly, mosaic evolution can be referred to as sequential acquisition of evolutionary changes within a single structure of the human body. The patchwork evolution of non-morphological features, such as human speech, traits of human life history, even human DNA or human gene. Okay, so here, if I have to explain it in a simple manner, our body, different parts in our body evolve at different rates. They have not evolved at the same rate, at the same pace. This can be referred to as mosaic evolution. How old is this concept? Who found it out? Okay, let me briefly tell you about this. Okay, so you can pick up this, what I've just explained to you is actually stated here like this for you to make a note of it. Different parts of a species evolve at different rates, resulting in organisms carrying combination of old and new traits. So one point of time, if you pick up human ancestors, Australopithecines, Pithecine refers to monkeys. At the same time. Like dentition, things like this, protruding canines, or what is it called, bigger, larger canines. Our canine size is now small, but if you see animals, animals have a bigger canines. So some of human ancestors have canines like that. Some human ancestors have prognathism, they have protruding face. We don't have protruding face, we usually have flat face. If you draw a line, more or less, of course, leaving the nose out, is more or less flat. But prognathism, where jaw is forward jaw is seen if you see in chimpanzees. They're forward jaw, right? So some humans have those forward jaw as well. They have features, dentition features, meaning teeth that look like those traditional or more primitive creatures. So what are we trying to tell you? We do carry some primitive, some modern features. This is the mixture of both old and new. That is how mosaic evolution can be defined. Okay, so this differential phase of evolutionary change is referred to as mosaic evolution. Are you able to follow this? Okay,
Sir,
so these sound very similar, sound easy when you follow, but unless you read and understand, you lose the essence of it. Sorry, go ahead.
sir, so from like if we compare from chimpanzees or something, it makes sense that it will be a different species, right? Because if you are talking about differences among ourselves, then that will not be mosaic evolution, right?
Correct. But when you talk about us today, we're talking about product, right? So even today, you may see some features like what are those called? Vestigial organs we have today. Vestigial organs. Some of them are still there. We don't use appendix. We don't use wisdom teeth so much. We still have them. We have tailbone. So even we are examples of mosaic evolution. We have some primitive features, but we are more evolved compared to, because it is more distinct if you pick up something that is in between, something that is in between us and in between our ancestors. It becomes more easier. Correct. Otherwise, even in us, this is an ongoing process. Mosaic evolution can be seen at any point of time. But you have to have a reference to compare. Correct? So it is easier for us to talk about Australopithecines or those we're going to learn in 1.6 or fossils, our ancestral species. Then it becomes easy to explain.
Sir,
Agree? Yeah.
Even if we have, if we take the Finches example, and they also had different beaks. So again, they had mosaic evolution.
Yes, they had different parts of the body. Maybe you can talk about types, wings type, wing nature. You do find some of those features are similar and some features that are newly evolved. So you can pick up several examples. All right.
Isn't it the case that everything we see is a mosaic evolution? Because
many, yes, in a way, yes, because you have some of the older features or the new features. Exactly. So mosaic evolution, we can pick up several such examples. So this is a common theme found everywhere. Okay, but write distinct examples, something that is obvious. Okay, so in this article, they briefly talked about when did this concept evolve. I think Gregory noticed this organisms are combinations of what he called derived and primitive features. This concept had begun at the beginning of 20th century, and then it evolved over a period of time. The concept was popularized by Simpson, G.G. Simpson, and Gregory in 1940s, and that is when they gave the name mosaic evolution. Okay, it was given by another scientist called Gavin D. Beard, but it happened in 1950s. So concept had begun in 1900s, early 1900s, and then in the mid 1900s is when they started using the term mosaic evolution. Okay, another example, you can pick up several such examples. Dinosaurs. Some primitive dinosaurs have derived features like bird-like features. They have some of them like Archaeopteryx. They had wings, correct, which is a traditional feature. Pulses, they have some primitive features like that. Primitive dinosaur-like and derived features like birds' wings. So this could be mosaic evolution. So they're a very good example because they form the bridge between the old and the new types of species like that. Mosaic, they have old versus new types of characteristics in them. Even human evolution can also be seen with respect to human-like brain size and human-like bipedalism. Primate-like, so between primates, between chimpanzees, or between monkeys and humans. We had ancestors that I was talking to you about. So they had some features like brain-like features like humans, okay, and bipedalism. Human-like bipedalism, human-like brain size can be seen, along with other primitive features. Okay. Yes, there are many details. I think we have not discussed that yet. So these examples you may not understand now that they talked about here. So you wait until we finish 1.6 to read it further because they talked about Homo erectus that they picked up from Java. Okay. So they have human-like femur, human-like bones, like femur bone is like humans, and a brain, small-brained skull cap. So brain and certain bones had mixed features. So like that, you find enough examples in human evolution, any species evolution. So finding mosaics, examples of mosaicism is not too difficult. You can say example like this, like, primitive dinosaurs and bird-like features in the Archaeopteryx. You can talk about human ancestors carrying the primitive features as well as the modern features. What type of modern and primitive features? Bipedalism like humans, brain like humans, but other parts of the body, hairy parts of the body, dentition like apes can be seen as examples. Okay, right. This is briefly what is mosaic evolution. It is easier for you to explain this later. That examples I was talking to you like Australopithecines. Okay, so they will become easy because we have to discuss them in detail, which we are going to do in 1.6. That will happen towards the end, very end, once we finish talking about the units. Is the concept clear to you? Yes. And could you write examples like what I just talked to you? I'm going to share this with you, okay? Right, good. So now we are coming to the last part of this where we need to discuss about few laws. The 3 laws given here. Dollo's rule, Cope's rule, and Gauss rule. We're going to discuss them. With that, we'll finish 1.4c. In the syllabus, it said Doll's rule, but it is it has to be corrected. It is called Dollo's rule, D-O-L-O, Dollo, not Doll. Okay, Dollo's rule, Cope's rule, and Gauss rule. Yeah. So let's first learn about Dollo's rule. What is Dollo's rule? Okay, these are all some ideas related to evolution given by some scientists in the past. You have to know what is Dollo's rule, who proposed it, and how did they come to that idea. Okay, so there is not much information on them as well. I heard Telugu Academy books carry some of this information, but otherwise I looked around online and I collected some information from few articles and I put the key points for you. So this is the document I'm going to share with you. So I made a summary of it in a couple of paragraphs like this. Okay, so understand what is Dollo's rule. Dollo's rule is given by, it's an hypothesis given by a French paleontologist, French born Belgian paleontologist called Louis Dollo. Louis Dollo is a Belgian paleontologist. Okay, born in France. He proposed this in 1893. So it's a hypothesis proposed by Louis Dollo. Louis Dollo. It is either called Dollo's rule or sometimes it is known as Dollo's law of irreversibility. So if they simply give law of irreversibility, you have to understand that they're asking about Dollo's rule. Law of irreversibility given by Louis Dollo. Let's understand briefly what is law of irreversibility. So simply, Dollo suggested that evolution is not reversible. So as per Louis Dollo, evolution is not reversible, meaning the newly formed species don't get back. They won't evolve backwards. Is that true? And what is the exact statement he gave? Because many of these are interpretations that we make today, not necessarily what they meant. So we have to be clear about that. So as per the Dollo statement, an organism is unable to return even partially to a previous stage already realized in the ranks of its ancestors. Okay, what is he saying? A species that is evolved cannot return, unable to return, even to some extent, even in few parts, it cannot go backwards to a previous stage already realized in the ranks of ancestors, meaning the features found in the ancestors. If you evolve into humans, it is impractical, looks like it is impractical. I'll tell you why it is impractical. To go backwards to have teeth like chimpanzees, heads like chimpanzees, brains like chimpanzees, may be unlikely. This is why they're calling it is not reversible. You cannot reverse this. Humans cannot become chimpanzees. What is the basis for this? Is it true? Does it have to be true? What do you think? Why do you think why someone thinks that evolution is irreversible?
Sir, it seems to be true because like the number of chances it will have, the probability of happening one chance will be always kind of impossible.
Correct. That is what they're talking about. The idea is that statistically it is improbable to take the same path. If you have hundreds of paths, it's like this. You are, let's say you're traveling from one city to another city. There are only few routes available and you are likely to take the same route. But let's say there are tens of possibilities, tens of routes to reach that place. What is the guarantee that everyone who is traveling from that place will take the same path if there are enormous possibilities? Very, very unlikely, right? Okay, this is what he's talking about. Okay, the statement that he made is often interpreted as something like improbability of regaining the lost structures or lost organs. That is how normally they say it is being described, but it is more than that. They're talking about a statement which is referring to statistical improbability. Statistically, it is unlikely to happen in the same way. We are not saying that it is impossible to gain the same structures in evolution. I even remember some organisms actually gained same structures after evolution. If I'm not wrong, it was snail gained some characteristics like that. So it is not impossible, but it is unlikely. So here what he referred to, as per Richard Dawkins, he interpreted Louis Dollo's law as just a statement about statistical improbability of following exactly the same evolutionary trajectory twice in the same manner but in the reversible direction. Statistically, it is improbable, but I don't think we can say that it is impossible. There seems to be some examples, if I'm not wrong, again seen in Ignos material, where there is a possibility of gaining same structure but unlikely. But as they're talking about certain rule here, we have to just state what Louis Dollo talked about. So here, the most importantly, you have to give the statement. An organism is unable to return even partially to a previous stage already realized in the ranks of ancestors is what you have to state. And then you can give an explanation to that it is a statistical improbability as discussed by Richard Dawkins. Okay, if you want to use a simpler sentence to that, the process of evolution cannot reverse itself by going through the same sequence of steps to reach the same point at the beginning that it was at the beginning. Correct? So the process of evolution cannot reverse itself because there are so many possibilities and they may not follow exactly the same path to regain it. But there are exceptions to this. It did happen, not necessarily with humans, but other species seem to have gained the same structures in evolution at different point of time. Okay, right. So for short note, this is sometimes is not enough. If you have to write, I think I have noticed in the literature, even they talk about what Stephen Gould has suggested related to Louis Dollo's law of irreversibility. What did Stephen Gould suggested? Said irreversibility forecloses certain evolutionary pathways once broad forms have emerged. Meaning once you have several different features, going back in a specific manner with respect to specific structure in your body is unlikely. He said you lose the possibility to go back in the same path because of the complexity. It's just very simple organisms. They have very few parts. Then it is likely that they can gain the same path. But complex structures like humans, animals, we have so many, like brain has evolved differently, our spine has evolved differently, arms have evolved differently. All of them going back to the same path is difficult, is unlikely. Okay, so they foreclose the possibility. Once a broad structure is formed, once a broad and complex structure is formed, going back to the primitive structure is unlikely. Okay.
Sir, in the first para you mentioned statement is often misinterpreted as less stringent, and then we have this in other words. So are we, in other words, we are saying the misinterpretation or the original
We are
meaning?
referring to the original concept there, in other words. So here we said, because how do you interpret this? Are we interpreting whether it is not possible to form the same organ? Right? So sometimes people started interpreting it as if like same organ cannot form again and again in the evolution. But I think it's more than that. It is more complex than that. It is talking about statistical probability of not being able to go back in the same path to form similar structures in future. Okay, so here it is, the first part is how is it actually taken by people? It is misinterpreted as a less stringent hypothesis regarding the likelihood of regain of lost structures or organs, which are unlikely to reappear in the same form. This is how people take it, but it is a bit more complex than that simple idea of not being able to form same structures. But normally, for explanation, this is the easiest way to talk about it. But in reality, it is not just about forming one organ or a couple of organs. It is about reversing the whole evolutionary process.
Sir, some of them also related with the environment. They say that since we cannot get the same environment and same characteristics, that's why we cannot have same evolution.
Yeah, environment could be one reason, but there are many factors which define this, right? Environment is definitely one of the key factors, but you can argue that what if you take them to the same environment? Do you think they will regain the same features? They will reintroduce them. Do you think they will gain the same features?
They might.
They may not, right? There may be other ways that they can survive there. The previous existing variety was one possibility, but that is not the only possibility. So they may now evolve differently to satisfy the same requirement. Correct? So instead of developing beaks in the bird to break something, they may develop very strong feet. Take the help of the feet. Correct? So there are other possibilities. So environment can be a common theme, but it may not result in the same species or same features because there are other possibilities to satisfy the same requirement. Okay? Yeah, and they explain it with example here. Once you adopt the ordinary body plan of reptile, let's say a species is becoming a reptile, already had genetic potential to that, it is becoming a reptile. So what happens? Many other options are closed. You are getting more and more specialized. And future possibilities must unfold within the limits of inherited design. Meaning, it's like this. I think I can tell you this. Let's say you are trained to become an engineer. You studied engineering, you worked in the engineering field. Becoming a biologist will be challenging for you. Becoming a psychologist, becoming, what was that I was talking about? So becoming a person with a specialization like accountant, for example, is difficult because you're trained to be someone else. Similarly, when someone is destined to become, let's say, humans or a reptile, you already have genetic potential to become something, and at the same time, you have less and less possibilities to become something else. You cannot become a bird because you don't have a feature of having wings. So as evolution goes forward, the possibilities to become something else gets reduced. That is what they're saying here. Once the ordinary body plan of an organism like a reptile is originated, is initiated, hundreds of other possibilities are closed. So this reptile cannot become a bird. And future possibilities have to happen within the ability, within their genetic potential. As I was talking to you already about this, if you don't have ability to grow in height, even if you are placed in an environment where the height is a requirement, you may not attain it because you don't have the genetic potential. Okay, so those possibilities are closed to become someone else, something else. Okay, this is briefly what is Dollo's rule. Evolution is irreversible. This is mostly statistical improbability to follow the same path to become same organism in future evolutionary process, given by Louis Dole. Okay, it's a hypothesis, so there are exceptions to this. There are some organisms, very few, but they gain same structures. Couple of times or at least twice in evolution. They lost the feature, they again regained the feature. But not in human evolution, so I didn't pick up that example. Because most of these evolutionary examples, we cannot limit ourselves to human examples. Sometimes it is difficult because evolution is a more complex thing that happened over a long period of time. So many of the examples are taken from outside human cases. Good? Is that clear? What is Dollo's rule? Okay, next we'll move on to Gauss principle. Gauss principle. So what is Gauss principle? Gauss rule or Gauss principle? Okay, Gauss principle is the one that is proposed by G.F. Gauss. G.F. Gauss is a Russian biologist. So it is proposed by a Russian biologist called G.F. Gauss in 1934. This is more easier to understand compared to Dollo's rule. So this principle is called principle of competitive exclusion. Similar to what we talked about in Dollo's rule, law of irreversibility that we talked about. Here it is principle of competitive exclusion. It is also referred to as principle of competitive exclusion. Okay, so what is competitive exclusion? As per this law, two species with the same niche is an occupation, the location or a position in the ecological system, in the ecosystem. Two species with the same function, in a way, cannot coexist in the same habitat. People with the same profession in the same place will experience competition, right? Two programmers working for the same organization, unless there's huge demand for that, they both are serving the same purpose. What happens? They only need one, but they recruited two. Eventually, what happens? Only one will survive, other one will go away. Who will survive? The one who is competitive enough will survive. Or, of course, in human cases, this may be a different story. If you're a relative of that person, or you actually kind of do a favor to them, the person may survive. But in reality, here you created a competition. The two people with equal capabilities, equal functions, one survives, other one goes away. Okay, we'll take an example and understand this a bit more. I'll give an explanation to this, but this should be easier. This is not too complicated. You're talking about two species with the same ability, performing same function, may not coexist in the same place. Because of what? Because of competition. Competition for what? Mainly existence. Competition for food, for example. Okay, so what happens here? They compete for the, sorry.
Sir, lion and tiger example in one habitat.
At one habitat, if they are relying on the same food, they won't be able to survive, or at least they will have competition. There is one possibility, one alternate to this, which I'll talk about. Okay, one possibility is they fight and the one who has enough capability will survive. Second possibility, they shift to different food. Tiger gives up and says, okay, I'm not going to eat animals anymore. I'm going to live on grass. It will survive. But some evolutionary changes have to happen. Right? So that programmer will say, okay, you're working on, I'm not good at programming. So if they say I'm not going to use C++, instead I'm going to use we use Perl as a programming language. So you shift to a different programming language. You can still survive, work in the same organization because you shifted your preferences. Okay, so if they compete for the same sources, less competent species may either be driven away, meaning they get extincted, they go away. Tigers have to be extinct if lions are competing so much with them, but they are not. They survived.
But sir, both are surviving, right?
Both have survived. Why? Because one, if there are enough lions and tigers with equal numbers to fight, they may not survive. And second thing is how much food source is available. Let's say there are only a small population of animals for them to live on. Then what happens if there are more lions and tigers? They won't survive. Which one will survive? The one which is more competitive will survive. But that's not the case, right? There's enough food for them. And the numbers wise also, they're not equal.
Sir, the case of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, sir, I think it was a similar case, like because both existed at a point and like one did survive.
No, I don't think they existed in the same place at the same time. There's only some overlap in them. Because Neanderthals and if you see Homo sapiens, they got actually, this is a later point of human evolution. So they already got distributed. So they were not coexisting in every place. I think there is one or two couple of places based on the evidences that they coexist. But Neanderthals could not evolve quick enough, so they got extincted, whereas Homo sapiens could evolve.
But does that follow Gauss's principle?
I can see the correlation there, but I'm little hesitant to pick up that as an example. Okay, let me check whether literature accepts as an example. But otherwise, if they coexist and one survived, others didn't survive, fits into this concept. Okay, but I have not seen them using it as an example. Let me cross-check if any source talks about it. Then we can confidently cite it as an example. Okay, let me check that.
Sir, but taking this example, say Gauss's principle, if they are competing for resources, then how does inbreeding take place? As in, they may be looked as competitors, right? That may not be like a major driving force for their extension. As in, the competition between two may not be if it did exist, probably may not have been a primary driving force, because we also have evidence of inbreeding. We don't, taking example of lion and tiger, we do have an example, something like mule, we have liger, but that is like, that's a forced mating.
Correct. So you're saying naturally they are not mating, they're not exchanging their genetic information, right? So they were having or at least sharing those capabilities, you mean?
So I'm saying that tiger and lion are naturally competing.
Correct.
So probably Gauss principle may be applicable, but Neanderthal and Homo sapiens may not be naturally competing. Evidence being there is they are inbreeding.
Correct.
So,
yes. Moreover, it's like competition is seen with every human. In other words,
yeah,
we all compete for the same sources. Not necessarily we are not different species. That may cause some issue. I think that becomes more complex even in the concept of social anthropology. Who would win? Political power, for example, economically strong, caste. They all make some groups of people in a given human population an easier way or easier method to survive than the others. Correct? But here the idea is not with respect to the same species, the competition within them, but two different organisms living on the same food or working on the same source. If there's a competition, who will win and what happens to the other one? Okay, so these are all observations based on observations that they made. Okay. Yes. So what happens to them? So the simple concept that we're talking about, one may extinct, the one which is weaker will extinct, the one which is actually stronger will survive. Or they have to shift their resources. Correct? So alternatively, the weaker competitor will follow an evolutionary shift towards a different ecological niche. I was telling you briefly, like of course tigers don't eat grass, but if tigers shift to eat grass, they will survive, but they have to evolve according to that. So this is another possibility. Shifting away from that resource, surviving on different food sources. So they are shifting to a different ecological niche or a position in the ecosystem. Consequently, competing species often evolve with distinguishing characteristics in areas where they both coexist. So to attain that, what do? They acquire changes to satisfy the new need. They both survive. It's like also example that we take for vectors. Some mosquitoes survive by living on plants. Some survive by living on animals. Okay, so they can survive despite of the competition. This aids in mate recognition, thus maintaining each species' superiority in exploiting slightly different ecological niches. Okay, so like that, they even find partners who carry these characteristics. Preference towards those make them survive. So basically, we are seeing the divergent evolution taking place here. In the competition, they may diverge to become something else. Okay, so an example of the competitive exclusion principle is based on Gauss experiment. So here, this is very specific. You may not, may not be a very suitable example in anthropology, but this makes it easy for you to understand what I'm talking about here. So one article I was reading with, that is, this is where I picked up this Gauss experiment. So there is a single-celled organism. You all heard about Paramecium? Studied in high school, Paramecium, slipper-like organism, protozoan, Paramecium, right? So this Paramecium, there are two types of species. One is called Paramecium aurelia, Paramecium caudata. Okay, don't have to by heart, remember it's not worth. So just mention two, scientists have done experiment on two microorganisms or Paramecium species. In the laboratory, when you individually grow them, they both survive in the same environment. So both aurelia, caudatum survive in separate areas, okay, on the same food. But when you put them together, one survives, other one dies. So together there is a competition that is happening. So when they are grown in the same test tube with fixed amount of food, both grow more poorly initially. Then aurelia eventually outcompeted the caudatum for food. So caudatum died because within our time frame we can do experiments with microorganisms, with humans, with other organisms. It is difficult to understand. But in the laboratory, it is easy to perform experiments with microorganisms. So what the scientists have done, they took two different species of Paramecium in the same food in different test tubes. They survived happily. But when they put them together in the same test tube, one survived, other one extincted. So within few generations, only aurelia got survived and caudatum died off. Because of certain features, aurelia could survive in the competition, but caudatum could not. So this could happen in a long duration in real life. Those that are competing enough can survive. Those that are not, they extinct or they find a new niche.
Sir, is somehow related to Darwinism theory.
Exactly. This is exactly, if you see the next point, Darwin Finches, the famous example given by Darwin, is a concept that falls under Gauss principle. Okay, the finches observed in Galapagos Islands were originally have beaks suitable for seed eating. They have evolved from seed eaters. But while many other forms have evolved through adaptive radiation to satisfy their feeding habits to reduce the competition. So adaptive radiation, which is an example for Darwinism, can be seen as an example as are a part of Gauss principle. So they satisfy the Gauss principle. So they are able to survive by shifting towards the different ecological niches. Here ecological niche refers to the food source. Through beaks, evolutionary changes have to happen in them. So they evolve distinguishing characteristics as we talked about. Here they evolve to have different types of beaks. So competition is reduced, they survived.
Sir,
Can pick up several examples for this. Yes.
sir, in humans we have we had some diseases for which there was a cure with some another disease.
Hmm.
I mean, for some cowpox, they had some small cowpox as a cure. So is that the same thing we are talking about?
No, because the one you are talking about is happened because of human intervention. Here we're talking about something that naturally happens. Okay. And second, we are not talking about different species. There you're talking about similar microorganism causing infection, and you're talking about the concept of vaccination, where material from cowpox is given to a person and who gained resistance to smallpox. Correct? So we're not talking about two different species competing here. We're talking about infectious agent, similar infectious agent is providing resistance to another infectious agent, which is a very different concept. Okay? Right. Good. So this is Gauss principle. So they're not too difficult, right? It is easy. Competitive exclusion. What happens in competition? What are the two possibilities? One is extinction. Second one is the adapting to new niche. Examples we talked about here. Paramecium example. This is to make it easy for you to understand, but I don't think this is a strong example you can cite in the anthropology. But you can talk about Darwinian Finches, which is normally discussed in sources. Okay, but it should be clear from both of these examples, like what does it mean by competitive exclusion? Correct? We're good? We're moving to the last one, that is Cope's rule. So what is Cope's rule? This is also somewhat simpler concept, not too difficult to understand. So this is given by an American paleontologist called Edward Drinker Cope. An American paleontologist, funny name, right? Edward Drinker Cope. So this is from 19th century, 1840 to 1897. 1840 to 1897. So what did he suggest? Cope's rule states about the observation that animal groups tend to evolve through time towards larger body size. So what are they suggesting, or what Cope suggested? Cope suggested that animals tend to grow large and large in size. Their body size increases in evolution. Why did he think about this? Why did he think that size is a component in evolution and gradually size is actually increasing in evolution? What made him to think? Because the work he had done on dinosaurs. So Cope is known for his work on dinosaurs and some fossils of mammals, which tend to have a bigger size. Okay, and he's a follower or a promoter of Darwinism. Cope was promoter of Darwinism concept. He believed in the concept given by Darwin, and he mainly worked on dinosaurs and some fossils of mammals. And when he created phylogenetic trees, I think I was using this word in the yesterday's class as well. Simply, we'll get into the details later. Phylogenetic tree means family tree, not family tree, evolutionary tree. When you are constructing or placing organism in the form of a tree based on how related they are, maybe common ancestor is put at the base. Like branches, you write down new species evolved from that. If you are drawing such a structure, such a tree is called phylogenetic tree, or a tree that is constructed based on evolutionary relationship. Such a tree is called phylogenetic tree. So he worked on this phylogenetics in understanding the similarities between the species. When he worked on phylogenetics of reptiles and mammals, he noted how average body size of them increased over time. So they tend to have larger body size over time in evolution. Like elephants, for example, whales, for example. Some you can see starting from microorganisms like bacteria to more complex organisms, and average size has increased. There is no doubt about it, right? But there are many exceptions to this. Not so. Do we say that most evolved organism is the biggest or largest of all? Are humans evolved the most, or elephants evolved the most? Is whale evolved the most, or humans evolved the most? There is some correlation, but it is not necessarily true. Correct? But because of his observation, he thought there is some tendency to gain larger body size in evolution. To a certain extent, it is true. An average, it is true from microorganisms to more complex organisms. But you cannot generalize this principle. Okay, you can give examples. One example, I think, not sure if I picked up this from IGNO. Evolution of horses from terrier-sized Hyracotherium, an ancestor of horses. Horses are 20 times bigger than this ancestor. So there is some tendency to gain size, there is no doubt. But why? Why is that the case? Why is there any benefit of growing in size? Is it beneficial or problematic to grow in size? Nowadays, if you ask humans, they say it's problematic, correct? Growing in size puts us at higher risk for cardiac problems and higher mortality rate, correct? Zero size is preferred nowadays. So, but leaving that, I just want to give you. Why should body size generally increase within animal lineages? Several reasons. Improved ability to capture prey. Lions. If you have bigger body size, easier to capture the prey. Or to escape predation. Dinosaurs and elephants. I don't think many organisms or many animals wanted to hunt them. They are big enough to scare them off. So bigger size actually helps sometimes. Greater reproductive success. Also, they say that higher rate of reproductive success is also seen, cannot be generalized again, but greater reproductive success can also be seen as one advantage with size. So sexual selection. Increased intelligence. Humans have bigger brain. We are more intelligent than other animals. Bigger brains than elephants. We are more intelligent. So bigger the size, sometimes better the quality or better the intelligence in this case. Higher quantity, higher quality. Cannot generalize it, but that is one possibility. Expanded size range of acceptable food. Also, the choices of food also increase with growth in size. Pick up the example of humans. What do we eat? We eat everything that one can imagine, correct? Especially Chinese. So there is no restriction. Starting from, of course, we rely on plants to any sort of animal. Pangolins, I think that is why they say that COVID happened now because of eating pangolins, snakes, all sorts of animals, camels. We are now receiving different infections which were not common to humans before. Okay, so that could be food acceptability seems to also increase. And we also talk about this another class. I think ecological anthropology will talk about Bergman's rule. We'll discuss here Bergman's rule. Body size of endotherms increases towards poles. More stockiness, heaviness towards the poles. So size has some advantage in adapting to environment. Increased heat retention. Okay, people living in polar regions like Eskimos, they tend to have more stockier appearance because they can retain more heat. We'll talk about that in different class in ecological anthropology. These are some advantages. So why in evolution it preferred to increase the size, although it cannot be generalized for some of these reasons. At the same time, we also have issues of gaining weight or gaining size, not weight here. I think you can guess that. What happens? What is the problem of gaining size or increasing in size? Do elephants have a problem in survival?
Lack of flexibility.
Lack of
Lack of mobility.
Lack of mobility. Need for bigger spaces. they cannot easily hide. Correct? They can be easily trapped. Correct? What the stories we see in Kerala and other regions. Size is a problem. Okay, the large animals require a great deal of food. I don't know if I know there is a movie in Telugu. How many of you are from Telugu states? Any of you are from Telugu states? One, that's it, right? Oh, so I cannot take this example. We had a movie in Telugu where a person who actually had a pet of an elephant struggled to actually give food to that animal. It requires a lot of effort, right? You can have a small cat, small pet, but cannot have elephant as a pet because food requirements. So they need a great amount of food, great deal of food. So we'll have a problem in finding food in famine or in shortages when there's food shortage. Elephants have to migrate because of that. Elephants have to migrate to huge distances to find enough food. So food is a problem. In addition, large animals are rare. So during crisis, size is clearly exposed as a specialization. So they are easily spotted. Like an unusual dietary requirement and a lineage of large animals is more exposed to extinction. Dinosaurs, they had higher tendency to extinct than other animals because of the food and because they can easily be spotted. Small creatures can hide anywhere, but these cannot be hidden. So definitely this larger size is a problem. That is why it is not always preferred. Average picture may show you that in evolution size may increase but cannot be generalized. So whatever that we are learning here given by Cope cannot be generalized, but we can see some tendency in why he explained this. Okay, right. So that is why many people disagree with Cope's rule. They say it is a statistical artifact. He missed in or he ignored many creatures which are complex enough but are small. So his focus was mostly on the large size animals. So it was a statistical problem. His sample size, so its sample type was wrong because his focus was mostly on some mammals and as well as the dinosaurs. So he thought so, but he was wrong. So it's a statistical artifact. So this can be applicable to the largest animals. So in general, if you talk about large animals, they tend to actually have certain increase in the size, but this cannot be applicable to the smallest species. They say that like bacteria, do you think bacteria has grown in size since ages? It has not. So some animals like humans, more or less, are maintaining a similar size. Elephants, other animals are maintaining, but small organisms tend to have the same small size. They're not becoming, otherwise all small organisms should become larger now, but that's not the case. So this cannot be applicable to the smallest species. They remain constant. Sometimes they may even reduce their size to satisfy their food requirements. So with increasing variance in body size through time, the mean body size often does not increase or not necessarily increase. So whatever Cope's rule that we discussed here may not be applicable. There are many exceptions to this, cannot be generalized. Okay, right. Right. With that, we finished talking about the unit 1.4C. Anything that you felt, anything that you noticed that I missed here? So we finished talking about 1.4 B and C in from 1.4. So we are going to switch gears from here. I'm going to talk to you 1.5, 1.6 towards the end because they're a bit more complex. We need more terminology and understanding. So instead of going with that, I would like to start with other chapters. So 1.4 B and C is covered here. Biological cultural factors of evolution is also related to 1.5, so I'm going to deal with that. 1.5. There's a lot of overlap with 1.5. So otherwise, we finish 1.4 B.Sc here. The next session, I'm going to start with the population genetics. So if you see 9.3, we are going to begin with, because I finished 9.2 Mendelian genetics. We are going to talk about 9.3. Why am I going to start with 9.3? Because some of the evolutionary factors we discussed here are applicable to Hardy-Wien-Bugla. I was telling you about Hardy-Wien-Bugla. So there again, we get into the details about various factors affecting evolution, like mutation, isolation, migration. So this is a very routine question in the exam. So we are going to deal with 9.3, where I'm going to talk to you about Hardy-Wien-Bugla, several factors related to that, and then few specific topics. There's something called genetic polymorphism. Okay, diversity in terms of certain characteristics, and marriages within the blood relations, like consanguineous marriages we talked about. Okay, so that and genetic load is, so there are few topics. This is probably will be able to wind up in 2.5 classes, 9.3, because we already discussed some elements in evolution. So in the next class, I'm going to deal with 9.3. So before moving to that, I'm going to send you these documents I've shown you today and yesterday. If there is anything missing from what I've shared with you, do let me know. Next part is questions. So what questions have we written in the last class and last sessions? I know I've given you questions on Mendelian inheritance, unit 9.2, right? We talked about, I think, polygenetic inheritance, right? We talked about those questions. Let me go through them, and I'll give you a few more questions for you to write. Did I give you any questions from evolution? Did I give you questions on evolution as well?
Yes,
Can you tell me briefly what questions did I give you?
Genetics only.
Sorry?
Last time it was on genetics.
9.2. Did I give you any questions on evolution?
No, sir.
No? Okay. I think I gave at least 2 questions to you, right? To write?
The 2 questions were on
9.2?
9.2. Yeah.
Right.
Discuss Mendelian principles, their applications to human populations, and the other question is lethal genes.
Okay.
Explain with suitable examples.
So I'll post a few questions to practice. Okay. Before you starting the next question, I'll give you the feedback on what you have written. I know that some of you have posted that to me. I'll go through them. I'll give you feedback, and I'll identify questions from the 1.4. So mostly, I'm going to ask you to write about theories of evolution. I think that is the most important question that is coming from here. Let me see if I have to give something else. Okay, but for sure, theories of evolution, traditional theories, and synthetic theory of evolution. Okay, I'll give you questions from the past exams. They are repeating in nature, so by practicing, you will prepare towards the exam. I'll also help you with the structure. Okay, right. Anything else? I think I have to share the content with you in this, and then give you questions and give feedback on the past questions. So classes wise, I'm actually planning to take as many classes as possible. Almost every day we will have a class. I may take one day in between because I still have some commitments at home. So maybe Saturday or one day here and there, but I will try to take at least 5 sessions every week. Okay. So time wise, I think I cannot reduce it any less than 2 hours. So we'll stick to this 1.5 hours to 2 hours, depending on the topic. If I finish topic like this, so I think we have another 8 minutes or 10 minutes. So I'll stop the class here. Then we can shift to the next session. Okay.
So by when do you think we can complete this?
So majority of it, I think we should be able to finish by mid. Okay, mid of February, majority of the topics. Okay, because some units are small. So ecological anthropology should be able to finish in 1.5 class. 3 classes, we should be able to finish ecological and epidemiological anthropology. Some units are quick. Some units take time, like a 9.4, 9.1, they take a little bit of time. Okay, so we are in what week? Just finished the first week of January, right? We're finishing the first week of January. Correct? Yeah, we started, second week. So we have 3 days this week, 1, 2, 3 weeks, 5 weeks we have. Okay, so 5 weeks means approximately 25 sessions, 50 hours. That should be close to enough. I think only part where we may struggle a bit because of too much of factual data is 1.6, but I made images for that. So I think we should be able to go through that content because it's a lot of factual data. But if I give you a comparison of apes, primates with humans, by picking up examples from our questions from the exam, it will become easy for us. So let's see. It will be clear for us, to us within 2 weeks of time. About 1 to 2 weeks will be clear. But I think going with 5 sessions a week should make it easy for us to finish by Feb 15th. That is what my aim. Maybe 5 days here and there. Okay. But did you find any problem with internet? Are you able to hear with any disturbance? It's all good. Great. Otherwise, I was hoping to travel somewhere and find a better place, but I'm able to manage with my phone connection. Because the connection I have at home, only BSNL option we have, which gives 6 and 7 Mbps speed. That's the best I can get at my village. Okay, so I was using Airtel, and luckily Airtel gives me more than 15 Mbps to 20, but the problem is it fluctuates. A couple of times, I think twice I got unstable internet connection. So if you find something like that where my voice is not clear to you, I'll repeat that or I'll slow down. Okay, good. Great. Guys.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
So welcome. We're going to stop the session here. If I don't set up the class, so as you are seeing that sometimes I'm setting up the class just before the session. If there is anything like that, I'm announcing it on the Telegram. Otherwise, we're going to have class tomorrow, day after tomorrow. We're going to have the classes. Okay, right. So we'll also pick up that work on answer writing. Did you all submit them? I don't know whether you all submitted this. I know few of you have sent me answers. If you have written but not submitted to me, do that. Okay, I can have a look at your answers, so you can improvise in the next on the next question. Great. Thanks everyone. Then we're going to end the session.
Thank you.